All right, so I think we're going to start, and if anyone comes in the waiting room, we'll just bring them in as soon as we see that. So, hello everyone. Welcome to today's program. My name is Kate Jacobs, and I am the preservation specialist for DHPSNY. I'm excited to kind of moderate this webinar for Aria and the co-facilitators. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping notes I want to mention. If you have any sound or tech issues today, please let me know in the chat box with a direct message. The first kind of teach-in portion of this program is going to be recorded, but our conversation after that will not be recorded. And then the recording will be available on the DHPSNY YouTube channel, and we'll also send it out to all registrants within the next week or so. So I want to kick things off by sharing a bit about the Documentary Heritage and Preservation Services for New York program, as well as our work with ARIA strategies. DHPSNY, as we like to call it, is a collaboration between the New York State Archives and the New York State Library, with services provided by the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts, which is a conservation lab in Philadelphia. DHPSNY is a statewide program that provides free planning and education services to support the vast network of collecting institutions around New York State, such as archives, libraries, historical societies, museums, and other organizations that safeguard and ensure access to New York's historical records and library research materials. So DHPSNY services include archival needs assessments, preservation surveys, condition surveys, strategic planning assistance, and access to a variety of educational programs like this one. If you'd like to learn any more about our services, you can check out our website, which is dhpsny.org. That's DHPSNY.org. And I'm going to quickly pass to John from New York State to kind of talk about the connections between DHPSNY and the State Library and Archives.
Thank you, Kate. I apologize if there's any background noise. There's a man with a grinder operating right outside my window. So if you're getting any of that, I'm sorry. Just wanted to sort of situate this in the larger sort of organizational context. The State Archives and State Library are part of the State Education Department here in New York. And the State Education Department is governed by the Board of Regents. Now, in 2021, the state or the Board of Regents created the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and issued their framework on culturally responsive and sustaining education framework, which is designed to help schools and teachers and school districts be more welcoming and inclusive spaces. So we saw an opportunity to do sort of parallel work with DHPSNY for the cultural heritage community, which is sort of where this webinar and this series of webinars sit. It's our chance to tackle some of those issues for cultural heritage and collecting institutions across the state.
Great, thank you. So because DHPSNY is positioned as a resource and a connector for, as John was saying, cultural heritage institutions across the state, we've really recognized that it's important for our efforts to be more actively engaged in doing and fostering anti-racism work within this field. For this reason, we've been working with Aria and her firm Aria Strategies to get a sense of what type of work our constituents are already doing, and where folks like you around the state and in other states even are interested in further developing their learning. So Aria Strategies, as a firm that provides mission-driven solutions for nonprofits, they're based here in Rochester, New York. DHPSNY's been working with them for a few years now to produce anti-racism content for collecting institutions. So really just grateful to have Aria facilitating this program today, as well as our co-facilitators that she has gathered. And with that, I'm going to pass things off to Aria for introductions on her end and to set the space for us. And again, I'll be available via chat if you have any tech questions. So just shoot me a message. Thanks, Aria. Looking forward to today's conversation.
Thanks, Kate. And thanks, John. And a huge thanks to New York State, the New York State Library, and the New York State Archives for funding this important work so that we can all get together and learn from each other. I'm Aria. I lead a really cool team of people out of Rochester, New York. And we do all kinds of consulting in the not-for-profit space. And I am just delighted to be here with you since 2021, working on anti-racism programming. So so excited to be here today with my co-facilitators, who you'll meet in just a few minutes. So our 2025 theme continues to be collections for the future of New York. Our guiding question is, what can we as practitioners in the field, both paid and volunteer, do to build and steward collections for the communities of tomorrow? So if you haven't yet, I welcome your participation in the chat. Please share your name, organization, and location so we know where we're all coming from. And then also tell us about your collections. Tell us about the research materials at your organization. We would love to hear from you. You can only pick one, so pick the thing that's on your mind the most. And then we'll take a look at that in a little while, just to kind of get a sense for who's here and what are we doing. We always have agreements and norms for this work. And these are agreements and norms that your community created in 2021, and we've been using them ever since. Lead with love. This is a journey. Drop the mic and step up, step back. So if you love to share, share, and then step back. So somebody who maybe doesn't love to share as much can also share. Speak for yourself and on your own experiences. Practice inclusion and respect and mutual positive regard. Use direct communication. Come to the space teachable and open your mind. Really listen for understanding. Stay engaged even when it's hard to stay engaged. Speak your truth. Experience discomfort. Expect and accept non-closure. Ask questions in the chat or message one of us directly. Be responsible for what you hear. Use I statements, assume best intent of the other participants, and most importantly, love each other into education. So today we're going to do what we've been doing all this year. We'll have some interactive large group conversation. We'll build community, share information, we'll have some discussion and debrief, and we'll make plans for the future. We're going to hear from some practitioners in the field and learn from their expertise. I encourage you to ask questions and just really step into being comfortable with discomfort. You can expect to feel curious, frustrated, heard, confused, and surprised. Our objective today is to explore what it means to prepare for research time in an archival space, both in terms of planning for the logistics of the visit, but possibly more importantly, the emotional and intellectual preparation that happens before and during a visit to an archival space. We have an anonymous question catcher. If you don't want to put your question in the chat, or you don't want to raise your hand and ask your question, we invite you to put it in the anonymous question catcher. I will pop that link in the chat in just a moment, and then I'll read from it when it's time for our Q&A. So we're going to start off with introductions from our co-facilitators. We have a mini webinar / teach-in that's recorded. And then we'll have a group conversation, first with the co-facilitators and then with the larger group that's not recorded. Plenty of time for your questions to ask our co-facilitators all about their process and their thinking behind how they approach this. And then we have some next steps and action items for you, and then we'll adjourn. So where in the state are we? Like I said, I'm in Rochester. We also have folks joining us from Ossining and folks from New York City. And we also have somebody way over in the UK from North America, but in the UK now. So we're quite spread out in bringing a diversity of experience to the room today. So I'm going to ask my co-facilitators to introduce themselves. We'll start with Kareem and then pass it to Leon and then pass it to Rich. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Kareem, if you're in the room, can you go ahead and introduce yourself? Maybe we can.
Kareem was having, I'm not sure if you're able to unmute Kareem. He was having some issues earlier, technically.
Oh, okay.
I don't, is he under your name?
Under
Or
Kevin Brooks.
Kevin Brooks. Okay.
Brooks, hang on here. Let's see. I can ask him to unmute. I just clicked that. Let's see.
Why don't we start with Mr. Davis? Why don't you start with introductions, and then we'll keep working on Kareem's sound.
Yeah.
My name is Leon Struggle Davis. I am a Bard graduate working to start my PhD, or finish the start of my PhD. I am a researcher, that is my thing. And yeah, that's me. I'm
Excellent. Dr. McKay, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name's Richard McKay. You can call me Rich. I'm a Canadian who ended up in the UK doing my master's and my PhD. I'm now about 15 years out of the PhD, affiliated with the University of Cambridge in its Department of History and Philosophy of Science. And yeah, I enjoy history, and I'm also a coach. So that's me. And
Awesome.
I see Kareem is still on the mute.
all right.
Struggle. Would you want to say something on Kareem's behalf?
So Kevin Kareem Brooks
Mhm.
is a scholar in his own right. He is a college graduate. He is also one of the founding members of a nonprofit called Pillars of Promise that we both are actually founders of. And he does community outreach, working with children and young adults who are at risk or caught up in the carceral system. And yeah, that's Kareem.
That's awesome. So I think what we'll do is once we can get Kareem on sound, we'll have him introduce himself. We'll just take a quick break for that. Thank you everybody for that. And let's see. So just to make sure everybody's on the same page, the mini webinar provides a common foundation for our conversation as we move through the session. This mini webinar is going to use the research team and their visit to the New York State Archives to look at carceral records as our case study. And they're going to, throughout the mini webinar, and then certainly throughout our conversation, we'll talk through some of our own examples. We'll hear their examples of getting started and then building on the work that's already happening. And just as a reminder, we're recording right now. And then we'll stop the recording when it's time for our conversation. And with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I am going to ask Rich to start sharing his.
All right. Are those slides coming through?
Yes, looks great.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, you'll see at the bottom of the slide here that we have a carceral sickness research squad. So that's the name of our team. You've seen Kareem, you've heard from Leon, but there's a third member who you've not heard from yet, Reggie, or Reginald T. Qualls. So I'm going to let him introduce himself first.
Hi, everybody. Yeah. For people that weren't here before, my name is Reginald Qualls. Reggie. I'm from the Bronx, New York. Currently live in Ossining, New York. I'm 33, but I have about like 11 to 12 years of time incarcerated, and I earned my associates my last bid, and yeah, so that's how I'm involved with Let's Link Down. And we continue to go on academic pursuits as we're doing right now.
And in part of the archival visit we did, I asked the guys how they would describe going to the archives to somebody who'd never been. And this was Reggie's answer.
I would describe it as it's kind of like walking into like a vacuum chamber. Metaphorically and literally, because it's a place that's closed off from pretty much everything and except people. But saw the attendance there. And just like a vacuum, like I guess like just the setting is kind of there's a lot of contrast there. Like it's a very sterile, bright, well lit setting, but then we have like these dark, dank documents. They've been around for longer than we've all been alive, and there's a lot of emotions in there, and it's really like loaded just with so many things, and it's kind of just like a stark contrast from the actual environment. I was a little apprehensive first going in there. It was just like I want to say like I felt like it wasn't really like an excitement, like giddiness or happiness. It was like, all right, this is like serious, and this is, I'm stepping into a place where, I might find something that I don't like or something controversial, or I might not find anything at all. But it wasn't like, I kind of was just like, the first day was just like more processing than anything. Surreality, like I'm actually here doing this, and on top of that, just trying to like think what it all means for me, putting my best foot forward because I didn't really know what to expect or know what I would find or know what I could actually do with the information that I did find. So I kind of just had like this like distant respect my first day just because, this is such a new environment, a new experience, and combating things that are already in my head, like we spoke about in the car, about like media and how that portrays these kind of things. And so it was just like such like a, just a, I don't know, like a breath of fresh air, but in a place you've never breathed before,
So unfortunately, Reggie can't be here with us today. He's caught back up in the system, which he really wanted to examine and deconstruct. And although he's not here, he remains part of the team, and we bring his voice here with us today from earlier recorded discussions. And even if he can't be here today, his reflections start us off well. He presents us with one user's perspective of the unfamiliarity of an archive, its emotional and intellectual stressors, its unknowns, but also its potential. You'll hear some more about this from Leon and from Kevin momentarily. So you might be wondering, how did we get here? How did four guys from completely different backgrounds end up working together on this project? So let's back up to March 2020 during COVID lockdown in London. I'm stuck at home thinking about contact tracing for COVID, which related to previous work I'd done on the history of patient zero. And then I went deep down a research rabbit hole connected to a project I'd been working on about the history of sexually transmitted infections. I came across an old public health report written by this New York official, William Munson. He argued that public health officials should conduct contact tracing for sexually transmitted infections, which was a bold new idea at the time. They did it for other diseases, but not for syphilis and gonorrhea. To justify this call to action, he described in detail several cases of outbreaks of syphilis and gonorrhea and how each one, in his view, was solved by essentially cross-examining ruthlessly anybody infected for the names of their sexual partners. And one of his stories stopped me in my tracks. It described an outbreak of syphilis among 13 male students at a university in New York. The whole episode was blamed not a student, but a chef working at the university. This biracial man got dragged in front of a grand jury, convicted of sodomy, was sent to the Elmira Reformatory for an indefinite sentence, and then transferred to Napanoch. From Munson's report, it seemed quite possible that this man had been scapegoated, and so I found myself wondering, could I find out more? 2 years later, in the New York State Archives, after looking through thousands of case files, I finally uncovered this man's records. Having hoped initially for 2 pages of documentation, I ended up with more than 100. And I hoped that this could represent the material for my next book. I learned that this man, who I'm going to be referring to by his middle name of Joseph, went from Elmira Reformatory to Napanoch, where he was classified as a feeble-minded moron. I learned that Joseph arrived at Napanoch shortly after it had been turned from a reformatory into a eugenics facility called the Institution for Defective Delinquents. Then there was a moment of real serendipity. I met up with a friend of mine from grad school, a friend, Lila McDowell, is her name, who had done her PhD research looking at in-prison college education, and since then had taken on a leadership position at a New York organization called Hudson Link for Higher Education in Prison. It just so happened that we met up for dinner the very night of the day that I'd found Joseph's records after 2 years of curiosity and wondering. So Lila heard me talk about Joseph and about his fascinating story and his daunting journey through the carceral system. And she heard the potential for this story to connect with folks who come through the programs at Hudson Link. And so she invited me to Hudson Link when I was ready to share some early work in progress. And that presentation really stimulated some powerful conversations with directly impacted folks. And I think this was a really important point in the process of stitching together communities. I needed to learn more about formerly incarcerated people, what language was respectful, and what questions, even permissions, that I might like to ask of them. The energy in that room was electric, and it made me wonder just the quality of the conversation, the interest, especially in the archival documents that I was showing images of or quoting from. I thought, if we're having this kind of dynamic conversation here, what would it look like if we cut out me, the middleman, and brought some of that expertise and deep understanding of the carceral system to the archival collections themselves? So Lila and I prepared a successful funding application focused on the idea of carceral sickness, kind of broadly framed, linked to the two institutions, Elmira Reformatory and the Institution for Defective Delinquents, that Joseph had traveled through. And we applied for funding to the New York State Archives under its Hackman Research Residency Program. And the application was encouraged, I found, by really clear statements from the New York State Archives, which encouraged applications for research that highlighted historically marginalized populations, and also was helped by a very enthusiastic early conversation I had with one of the archivists. So a shout out to Claire Fleming. We got the funding. And so soon after, we recruited a team of 3 directly impacted scholars from within Hudson Link alumni, some of whom had only returned home a few weeks before applying. And you're going to be hearing from some of these co-researchers today. You've already heard from Reggie, and Struggle and Kareem will speak in a bit. We prepared for archival research at first over Zoom and then in person, reading history, reviewing archival research procedures, and identifying possible topics of inquiry. Beforehand, I spent quite some time thinking about anything that might be triggering about the physical space of an archive for a researcher who'd spent time in prison. I really didn't want any of the team to be caught by surprise, caught unaware, and have something that they weren't expecting to interrupt and get in the way of what would already be a demanding process, both energetically and emotionally. We tried to keep the research planning process balanced between open-ended enough to allow individual researchers to follow their own paths, and also, but not leaving them overwhelmed in the vastness of the archives. So here are a few pictures of us at the archives in the summer of 2024. We spent long days reading through documents and then reflective discussions about what it all meant. The daily conversations were crucial for helping us to tease out meaning, to share each other's feelings in relation to the work, and to maintain a sense of momentum and connection. Ultimately, these discussions culminated in presentations about our work to Hudson Link alumni, to archivists at the State Archives itself, to students inside Sing Sing prison, and we weren't allowed to take a picture of the prison, so this is just nearby looking at the river, and more recently to historians at a conference in Boston in May. Our group has been referring to our process as transformative history, and by this we mean revisiting stories from the past with fresh eyes, building research teams with diverse backgrounds, including expertise shaped by lived experience, and trusting the process of learning, writing, and presenting together. And some of these points, I'm sure, could be adapted or even adopted for collections of the future. Now, to share a bit more about what made success possible in the archives, I'm going to try passing the mic to Kareem. And maybe he has... It seems I don't see Kevin in the room. Struggle.
No,
Do you
he's
see
on the phone. I see him at the top of the screen. He's holding his phone, and I guess he has his laptop. So I'm not sure if he even is aware because he's looking. The laptop is what's giving us this image.
I wonder if the organizers could try sending the unlock or unmute one more time, and whether that will come through on the laptop differently.
Yeah, I have sent that a couple times and I messaged him. Kareem, if you could hear us, is there like a audio button somewhere that you could unmute? Hang on, he just entered the waiting room on it, or entered the Zoom on his phone. Maybe this will work.
You're still on mute from the phone. Your phone is on mute. Okay, wow.
There we go.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, excellent, great.
All right. So I'm Kevin Brooks, as you already know. Well, we like to pick up. I'm gonna pick up where Rich just brought me in. One of the beautiful things about the archives was that Rich was actually preparing us for the trip as we were on our way. As soon as we got off the Amtrak and as we drove to the actual archives, Rich also he introduced us to a lot of predominant landscape and artifacts on the way to the actual archives, such as the churches and a lot of these prominent sculptures that played a part in the Albany area. So we was already being prepped prior to walking in. The beauty of going into the archives is that we all had this this type of inclination that we just had to find something, because we knew that answering this call to the voiceless people that we had just previously left after doing such amount of time in prison, And we wanted to answer that call. We knew for us personally that this was going to be a very big project that we was working on, and to go into this space where it was quiet, it was welcoming, and coming from a place that we always felt that everyone that was against us, this was a whole different, space. So the staff that worked in the archives, they gave us experience of eagerness to help us, and they gave us access to everything that was available to us. They showed us how to handle this fragile material, and showed us how to take care of it and navigate ourselves from station to station. And we approached the archives with a little curiosity, but most importantly, we approached it with respect. And we are so appreciative towards the staff there, because they opened it with open arms, and gave us the empowerment to talk with a different purpose. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Are you passing over to Leon, or do you have another point to add?
Well, I just wanted to say that, there was the experience that we encounter. We understand that this experience isn't universal. Each person that enters the archives, they bring their own history, they bring their own wounds, their own reasons for looking back. Some seek closure, others seek the truth. Many simply want to understand how they were seen in an institution that rarely asks the truth. The emotional terrain that the archive works is deeply personal. What feels empowerment to one may feel re-traumatizing to others. So approaching the archives um, is very personal to the researcher. Every researcher has their own personal feelings and ways of how they're going to approach the actual archives. And there's no single way to do it. And you know, there's just there's different stories that diverge from races, genders, and sex, and from sentence length and support systems. Everybody has their own resilience when it comes to this type of research, and respecting the way the archives have been maintained over the years is, it shapes a different a view for individuals that want to do this research. And most of us that want to do the research to unfold this hidden history, it's a different way of connecting to society, a different way to connecting to personal cultures, or having a different understanding or perspective on the history that's already been laid down in front of us, and understanding that this helps shapes the way individuals think and help them grow. So coming from a challenging institution that labeled us and uh, took our names and gave us numbers, um, we have a different approach. And one of our main approaches is like not to be biased towards this research or go into this research with a biased mental state. So we're just here to reveal the truth and give the narrative of the truth, and respect those voices that couldn't be heard. And we know that approaching this project, that it was going to be different, and having that eagerness to find something that was going to be moving for the people as well as for ourselves was very challenging, but we was very successful. Now I'll pass it on to Struggle. Sorry for the delay, guys.
That's okay. That's fine. So I sit here and I'm thinking about the resounding question that we begin with. In that area introduced, the subject matter of comfortability in these restrictive spaces that are traditionally restrictive. And I think about when I first stepped into the New York State Archives, only 3 or 4 months home from prison, I carried with me 3 feelings: excitement, confidence, and fear. I was excited because I had only entered the vault of memory. I had finally entered this vault, a cathedral paper with a past breathes through brittle pages and the dust carries the weight of forgotten voices. I wanted to uncover what had been silenced, to trace the stories of erased past but not destroyed. My aim was simple: to find the buried voices and to amplify them. I was confident because this is not new to me. Inside prison, research was survival. I learned to piece meaning from fragments, to carve truth out of silence. The methods I built in that cell and in those classrooms transitioned and translated seamlessly into the archives. I knew, I mean, I knew prison and piecing these fragments was a discipline. I knew I had the rigor and the discipline, and yet beneath excitement and confidence, I carry fear. Not fear of failure, but fear of being too certain, fear that I thought what I knew would blind me to what I didn't know, if that makes sense. The archives in a strange way comforted me. The order, the rules, all of that reminded me of the prison I had just left. After only a few months home, that structure felt familiar, stabilizing. But comfort carries danger, because the archives, like the prison, are not neutral. They are steeped in the same logics, in the same order and classification and control, the same systems. They hold the signatures of warden, the notes of doctors, the reports of lawmakers, humans whose lives have been flattened into data, into diagnosis, into labels. As I was in that space and I read, I felt a pull toward the men in those files. I knew their pain. I recognized their silence. I felt connected because I was one of them. At least I used to be, and still presently feel I am one of them. And yet to do this work, I had to discipline myself. I had to step back even as my heart pressed closer. That tension between heart and mind, between connection and distance, shaped every page I turned. And the lesson is this: the archives did not erase the prison I came from. They revealed its reach. They showed me how incarceration outlives the cell, how it seeps into paper, into policy, into the very language used to define a person. What I felt in those pages was not just history, it was a carceral sickness, alive, untreated, still shaping the present. But here's what we must use to broaden our vision. This story is not held only in Albany's towers. It is in the historical small societies scattered across Albany and in New York. It is in the prison museums where punishment is put on display. It is in the dusty boxes of local collections. These too are our audiences. These too are sites of reckoning. And I say to the gatekeepers, I speak plainly. Open the doors. Loosen the hinges. Do not let privilege bar the way. Yes, preserve what is fragile, but do not confuse preservation with exclusion. The archives should not be a fortress. It should be a table, a space of invitation where people don't just sit, but they eat. A space of welcome. And I must say that during my visit in Albany and our visit there, the staff did just that. But it must be progressive, consistent, and reimagined. I know what it is to sit outside that door, to be a spy at the threshold of knowledge, listening for scraps, shut out from the rooms of privilege. And I know what it is to finally be allowed in. That shift from outside of the scholar transforms everything. The archives become not only a vault, but a living space of possibility. And here's where the contrast matters. The traditional researcher walks into the stacks with tools laid before them. The incarcerated scholar learns another way. We learn how to gather fragments, to build from rumor, to stitch from truth what survives, to place these side by side, not to pit them against each other, but to see how both deepen our understanding, both uncover what has been buried. And so I say this: history is not dead, it is active. It breathes through the archives, it bleeds through the records, it speaks, but not if we're not listening. If we listen, if we're willing to, the same sickness that shared and shapes a prison centuries ago, we'll see it still infects our presence. And if we want to heal what is broken now, we must first confront what has been broken. And what is broken then, still broken now. This is why I urge you to go to the archives, go to the small societies, go to the museums, sit with those pages, sit with those artifacts, let them disturb you, let them wound you, because history is not a distant story. It's living, it's present. It is the echo that shapes who we are and who we might yet become. I have learned through my incarceration that to change the present, we must look at the past. To heal the future, we must reckon with our history. And if we are brave enough to listen to the silence, bold enough to amplify them, then we will see that the archives are not only about preservation, they're about possibility. And that possibility is nothing less than the cure of our sickness. So when we open the door to these sites, the archives, the museums, things that have been traditionally restricted, when we are able to utilize our research from a space of connection, we'll be able to amplify the voices that are traditionally silenced. We'll be able to accurately iterate history. I thank you. I turn it back to you, Area.
That was awesome. Rich, do you have anything that you want to, or Kareem, do you have anything that you want to add before we end our recorded part?
I
No,
would say,
oh, sorry, you go, Kareem.
I would just say for me, the archives, it's a space of possibility. It allows me to trace the lineage of the carceral practice, to challenge the assumptions baked into the institution's memory, and to contribute to the broader movements for justice. But more than that, it allows me to reclaim my own story, not as it was written by others, but as I chose to tell it now. And that was the most important uh, piece for me, peace of mind for me going into the archives, because there's a story that each one of us want to tell, each one of us want to share. And we just scratched the surface if that's, giving it any justice as to what we experienced, especially just coming home from doing a stint of time. We thank the staff and Hudson Link and Rich that have given us this opportunity to open a door to a different view, giving us a different understanding of what's really happening in society before we was even thought of, and being able just to touch some of that history, because we know that the people that wrote in these ledgers and put these books together and laid down this history didn't have the thought of former prisoners reading over and touching this work that they put together. So that we thank, everyone that contribute to that. Thank you.
Awesome. Rich, do you want to add a last sort of thought before we end our recording?
I think we covered it pretty well in the presentation. I think maybe I'll just end by saying that the process of doing this work together, the focus on an exchange of expertise, understanding, and skills, a real exchange, it's led to real deepening of my love of history. It's perhaps become one of the most meaningful and unexpected. I did not expect to be going, as you heard from the story about Joseph, it caught me a bit by surprise. So it wasn't, it grew rather organically from an unexpected beginning, but it's turned into some of the most meaningful work of my career, and um, which it's continuing. The team, our team's work continues. So I just want to thank them for being part of it too.